Madam President, it is 5 o'clock.
Thank you, Deborah. Welcome to the April 14th, 2020 USD 305 Board of Education meeting. This is our first regularly scheduled meeting in the new regular way of appearing by video conference here in the time of COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Ann Zimmerman. I'm president of the board. We welcome all of you who are joining us virtually. If you'd like to follow along with the meeting, you can access the agenda packet by going to the district website, www.usd305.com. I now call the meeting to order. We are going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. According to board policy BCBI, public participation, the board may include a time for public forum and may permit, at the discretion of the board president, public comment during agenda items. However, during our virtual meetings, we will not be inviting comments. We encourage patrons to email the board with comments by going to our website, www.usd305.com, and clicking on the Board of Education tab. I would like to take this time to have each board member introduce him or herself. We're going to start alphabetically. Mark.
Had to get my mouse to the unmute button. I apologize. I'm Mark Bandre. Thank you.
Emma.
Emma Doherty, thank you.
Jim.
Jim Fletcher.
Scott.
Scott Gardner.
Gabe.
Gabe Grant.
Dana.
Dana Casso.
And I'm Ann Zimmerman. I would like to remind the board members and the superintendent and all presenters that when you speak, please address yourself by name first. I will ask each of you by name to state your vote when voting takes place. The first thing we need to do is approve the agenda. Do I hear that motion?
Ann, Madam President.
Oh, yes.
I do need ask you.
Yes, sorry.
We need to amend the agenda. We did to the personnel. And so there is a personnel report addendum, and we did place that document online, Madam President, so that patrons can see that addendum.
Thank you. And I think there was a small correction on the minutes from the the March 31st meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, when we get to the consent agenda,
Oh, that's right. That's just the.
Knows what that is. Yes.
Okay. All right. I got to keep my agenda separate. Okay. So, Emma, were you about to make a motion?
Yes, I was, Madam President. I make a motion we approve the agenda as corrected, please.
Do I hear a second?
Madam President, Jim Fletcher, second.
Thank you. Emma has moved and Jim has seconded approval of the agenda. Is there any discussion on this? If not, we will vote in alphabetical order. Mark?
Mark Bandre, aye.
Emma?
Emma Doherty, aye.
Jim?
Jim Fletcher, aye.
Scott?
Scott Gardner, aye.
Gabe?
Gabe Grant, aye.
Dana?
Dana Casso, aye.
And Ann Zimmerman, aye. Motion carried 7-0. Now we're on to the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of the March 31st, 2020 special meeting, which has one correction on that. Is that
right? Right, Madam President, this is Superintendent Xline, and I need for you to note that the minutes need to be amended with the following correction on page 3. The motion and second for the graduation resolution have been amended to Gabe Grant was the one that made that motion, and Jim Fletcher was the one who seconded that motion. Good grief, motion.
Makes me want to burst into song.
I
Okay.
know.
Okay, that's included in the consent agenda, along with the minutes of the April 2nd, 2020 special meeting and the personnel reports. The financial reports, which include the March bills list from March 19th, 2020 to March 31st, 2020. We need to approve the encumbrance listings, which include one to ACT Aspire for assessments for the 2020-2021 school year in the amount of $33,840. Next to Edgenuity for virtual classroom and web administrator site licenses for Central High, South High, and the diploma completion program in the amount of $51,824. To the Learning A to Z in the amount of $28,336.50 for the Reading A to Z license renewal. To Skyward for the renewal of the district's student record system in the amount of $62,615. And to Delayed Landon Financial Services, Inc. in the amount of $29,540.17 for the Commvault backup and restore system. Also on the consent agenda is to approve the Central High Robotics gift acceptance from the Gustav and Hannah Applequist pass-through fund through the Greater Salina Community Foundation in the amount of $10,000. Do I hear a motion on the consent agenda?
Madam President, this is Jim Fletcher. I move that we approve the consent agenda with modifications as presented.
Thank you, Jim. Do I hear a second?
Madam President, Scott Gardner, second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we accept or approve the consent agenda. Any discussion on this? Then hearing none, we'll vote in alphabetical order. Mark?
Mark Bandray, aye.
Emma?
Emma Doherty, aye.
Jim?
Jim Fletcher, aye.
Scott?
Scott Gardner, aye.
Gabe?
Gabe Grant, aye.
Dana?
Dana Casso, I.
And Ann Zimmerman, aye. Motion carried 7-0. Let's see. The next thing on the agenda is the action agenda. And we will start with the resolution of the Board of Education's intent to non-renew contract for non-probationary teacher for 2020-2021, Part A. Aaron, right?
Thank you, Madam President. This is Erin Wright. I'm here this evening to ask the board, make a recommendation to the board to issue your intent to non-renew a non-probationary teacher for the 2020-2021 school year. Within the terms of our negotiated agreement, any teacher who administration decides, believes should be non-renewed for the following school year has a right to receive notice and a request, ability to request a hearing before the board. So we will begin that process tonight with your recommendation.
Okay, there are two of these. Do we name this person or we just, how do we proceed here?
You can just state on the record that you will vote. You're going to have to vote about whether you would like to not the contract for the first teacher, state the name, and then we'll do one for the second.
Thank you. Just a minute. Okay, so I suppose the person making the motion needs to state the name. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that first one is Annette Hayes. So do I hear a motion on this item?
Madam President, Scott Gardner, I move that we do not renew the contract for a non-probationary period for Annette Hayes for the year 2020-2021.
Do I hear a second?
Madam President, this is Gabe Grant. I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we pass the resolution of intent to non-renew the contract for this non-probationary teacher. And it's been, is there any discussion on this? Hearing none, we will vote. Begin with Mark.
Mark Bandray, aye.
We should add Ms. Wright on this, or should we just proceed as we just did?
The only thing, and I don't know that you need to verbally add it, but because it is in the resolution, but you are by this vote directing the board clerk to issue the notice to the teacher that of your intent to non-renew, which gives them the reasons for that and the rights that they have before them that they recognize before the next meeting.
That's in both of these cases?
That's true. And it's in the
Okay.
resolution.
Yes, okay, which is in the packet, so everybody has a chance to look at it if they want to. And I know that all of us have, all 7 of us. So this is Kimberly Stober. Do I hear a motion on this resolution?
Madam President, this is Gabe Grant. I move that we adopt the resolution declaring our intent to non-renew the contract of Kimberly Stober, effective for the 2020-2021 school year.
Do I hear a second?
Madam President, this is Dana Costo, and I second that motion.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this? Then, Mark, what's your vote?
Mark Bandray, aye.
Emma?
Emma Doherty, aye.
Jim?
Jim Fletcher, aye.
Scott?
Scott Gardner, aye.
Gabe?
Gabe Grant, aye.
Dana?
Dana Costo, aye.
And Ann Zimmerman, I vote aye. Motion carried 7-0.
Thank
The
you.
next, yes, thank you, Ms. Wright. Next on the agenda is support staff vacation payout. And at this point, I think Jim Fletcher is going to leave us. Talk about that, Jim.
I'm going to excuse myself during this vote due to a potential conflict of interest.
Thank you. So Ms. Xline, you are going to present on this, correct?
Yes, I am. You made a motion, you approved that our hourly employees are being paid during the March 31st meeting. And so during that vote, what was decided is that while the schools are closed per the governor's directive, that our hourly employees would continue to earn their salaries. And many of our 260-day hourly employees are working right now, and they're working full-time, long hours. Due to the nature of their jobs, taking vacation time is really posing a challenge given just changing situation with COVID-19. The agreement with those 260-day hourly employees is that they are allowed to carry over some of their vacation time to the next fiscal year. But any time that they have accumulated that is in excess of 20 days is forfeited as of June 30th. And so we would like to propose to you that this one time only for those 260-day hourly employees, that we buy back the days that would be forfeited should they not be able to take them. We do have some people that will be able to get those in between now and the end of the year. But for those people who will not be able to take those vacation days, we would like to propose that we buy back any of those days that would be forfeited up to 10 days. The maximum cost that would be to the school district is of $128,483.53. And so that's our recommendation. We really appreciate the fact that we have people in our management information systems, in our maintenance and operations department, some of our administrative assistants who are continuing to work. And just because of the nature of the situation, we feel like this would be a good faith move on the part of the board, should you so desire.
Thank you, Ms. Xline. So some people have only vacation now, and some people can't take any vacation now. So This is for those who can't take theirs. Do I hear a motion on this matter?
Yes, Madam President, I, Dana Casso, move we approve the action agenda support staff vacation payout.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
This is Mark Bandre. I second the motion.
Thank you. Dana has moved and Mark has seconded that we approve this matter. Is there any discussion on that?
I'd just like to thank the superintendent and staff for bringing this forward. It's something I hadn't thought of as a consideration, so I'm glad the idea was brought forth. It's the right way to treat quality employees. It helps make, in my opinion, USD 305 that much more of a destination for potential employees. And I hope, should this pass, the community recognizes the value in our school district.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Then we will vote. Mark?
You'll be shocked to know that I, Mark Bandre, aye this motion.
Emma?
And majority aye.
Jim? Oh, Jim's not here. Scott?
Scott Gardner, aye.
Gabe?
Gabe Grant, aye.
Dana?
Dana Casso, aye.
And Ann Zimmerman, I vote aye. Motion carried 6-0, and we need to invite Jim back in.
I have done so. We'll see here how long it takes.
Okay. Jim, we can see you, but we can see your square, but we can't see your face yet. There you are. Very good. Welcome back. The last thing on the action agenda is the food service meal program, and Ms. Xline is going to present on that. Go ahead.
Okay, this is another group of employees that we have working on a daily basis. Not all of our food and nutrition services staff, but we do have staff that is making available breakfast and lunch to about 1,300 students a day. So we're serving about 2,600 meals a day. And I would like to recommend to you, because this staff has been working regularly since the challenges with COVID-19 began, we would like to show our appreciation to them. And we're proposing a stipend in this situation. For each week that a food and nutrition staff member is working during the building closures, we would suggest a $50 stipend. We would further suggest that any food nutrition service employee that works the entire shutdown that was issued by the governor, which would mean through May 21st, would be compensated an extra $50 for a total of $500. So $50 a week, and if they work the entire shutdown, an additional $50 for a total of $500 possible. And the total cost to our food nutrition budget would be $20,000. We really feel like it is important for us to be nourishing the kids in Salina. We feel like this is a really nice service that we are providing. We are allowed to continue to do those grab and go lunches. We're offering those at 7 sites on a daily basis from 11:30 to 12:30. And I think that this would be a really good way to show our appreciation for that staff that's on the front line, working for our families to provide that on our behalf.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion on this matter?
Madam President, this is Mark Bandre. First, I'd like to thank the administration for bringing forth this idea as well. These quality employees are doing a tremendous job, and it's certainly the right thing to do for our employees, as are providing these meals for our needy students, in my opinion. So with that introduction, I'd like to move that the Board of Education adopt this proposal toward the food service program stipend as presented.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Madam President, the Gabe Grant, I second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we give these pay these stipends to our food service meal preparers. Is there any discussion on this? Hearing none, I will vote. Mark?
Mark Bandre, aye.
Emma?
And majority aye.
Jim?
Jim Fletcher, aye.
Scott?
Gardner, aye.
Gabe?
Gabe Grant, aye.
Dana?
Dana Casso, aye.
And Ann Zimmerman, aye. Motion carried 7-0. We will now move to our discussion agenda about the proposed changes to attendance center boundary guidelines, and that will be with Shanna Rector.
Good evening. I'm here to introduce or to talk about the proposed changes to attendance center boundary guidelines. And I am going to go ahead and share my screen with you. And that way you'll be able to see what we have in the agenda packet. And I will wait for the host to go ahead and give me screen sharing rights.
That's done.
Okay, so I will go ahead and go through basically what is in the agenda packet. And the reason why I'm doing this is I want to make sure that everything that is in the packet to be able to explain a little bit more in detail, and also to make sure that our viewing audience is able to hear the background information, and then I will also be able to answer questions for the board members. And so as we talk about the kind of the background and kind of what got us here. So in 2011-2012 school year, the district attendance center boundaries were reconfigured to bring a better balance of student enrollment and demographics to all district attendance centers. This reconfiguration followed an extensive community engagement process and was approved by the board on January 11th in 2011. Now, since that time, we have had to make several adjustments to our boundaries. And the reason for this is to balance the enrollment numbers between the elementary attendance centers. And so as we've been looking at this over the last several years, and then very specifically over the last several months, as a district team, we've been reviewing the attendance center enrollment trends in relationship to the school boundaries. And so as you look at the chart that's on your screen, is that this is the enrollment trend kind of head count from 2016-17 through 2019-2020. And as you look at the different schools that we have here, you see that some schools have kind of gone up and down. We've had some that have stayed fairly balanced. Coronado, haven't seen a lot of change. When we look at Cottonwood, we saw a little bit of a spike, and then it has declined over this last year. Hughesner, we see that they've stayed pretty steady. When we look at Meadowlark, we see that there has been an increase over time. When we look at Oakdale, we see a decrease. Schilling has kind of gone back and forth a little bit, but fairly stable. Now, Stewart, we do see that we have an increase in Stewart, but because of some internal things with our special education programs, some of those numbers will be adjusted in the 2020-2021 school year. And then in Sunset, we see that they have kind of declined over the last few years. But I really want to point out the difference between the largest and the smallest schools. When you look at the 2016-2017 school year, we had a difference of 62 between the largest and the smallest. And then you'll see over the next few years, we've seen that number increase. And in 1920, we had 163 difference between the smallest and the largest schools. So as you see, our schools are getting kind of wider and wider in their sizes. And that is something that we really wanted to make sure that we looked at and make sure we can make adjustments to that. And so the recommendation that you are getting tonight is that the USD 305 Board of Education should adjust the boundaries between Oakdale and Meadowlark. Now, let me go ahead and go into some of the rationale for this. So from the chart, we can see that Oakdale's enrollment is significantly lower than the other elementary attendance centers. As we look at Oakdale, we see that Oakdale has continued to decline, and we had 324 students at this year's official 920 count. When we look at our enrollment at the other schools at that time period, we had from 389 to 487. So you can see that Oakdale was much smaller than even our other smallest school. And then we had Stewart with the largest enrollment. But like I said, there are some changes that will happen that are happening due to special education services that you've heard of at a previous meeting. And so I won't go into those details here tonight. What I'm focused on tonight is the boundary change that we're looking at. And so Oakdale and Meadowlark share a boundary line. And so that really got us to where we were looking at that line and thinking about how do these two schools with that shared boundary line, is there something that can happen with them that may be able to change our trend and also allow us to achieve a little bit more balance? And so Oakdale's enrollment has declined over the last 3 years. We've seen that Meadowlark's has increased. And so based upon the trends in the two buildings, it does not appear that the balance in enrollment will improve without boundary adjustments. And so actually, we actually believe that those imbalances will actually increase over time. And so what we are proposing is that reorganization is designed to bring an improved balance between our elementary schools while affecting the fewest district families. So we're going to focus on Oakdale and Meadowlark at this time with this boundary change. And so the recommendation is based upon the number of students or children residing in that area who currently attend our schools. When we look at the projected enrollment impact, the number below in the chart below, and I'll go through that in just a minute, they represent the projected enrollment shift from all families whose students currently attend Meadowlark if they choose to move their students to Oakdale. Now, when you think about if every one of these families was going to move to Oakdale, that really is quite unlikely. But over time, what we would expect is we'd start to see this balance out as families move in, as we get new kindergartners into the area. And so we'd start to see that balance out. One of the things I really want to point out is that we are not mandating that the students who are currently going to Meadowlark that are affected by this boundary change, we are not mandating that they change schools. And the reason for this is because we want this to be a choice, because we recognize the importance of the relationships and the stability of attending schools. And, as we looked at this, months ago, I think it's even, more prominent now that we really do believe that there needs to be some stability there, and families that have been in the Meadowlark School District will be able to continue in that school district. But those that are new to our district and kindergartners coming in that don't have any siblings will go to Oakdale in that area. So let's look at our projected enrollment numbers by grades 1 through 5. So when we think about this, these are going to represent our current K through 4 students. And so if we look at next year, if there is no boundary change, Coronado, Cottonwood, Hughesner, Schilling, Stewart, and Sunset, these schools are not going to be changed with or without a boundary change. The schools that we are focused on are Meadowlark and Oakdale. As you look at Meadowlark, if we have no boundary change, then they would have 377 students. But with the boundary change, if all students living in that area chose to go to Oakdale, we would see that school enrollment be 315 for grades 1 through 5. When we look at Oakdale, if there is no boundary change, we see that the numbers there are 231. And when we think about that, that's 146 difference between those two schools, Meadowlark and Oakdale. So we can that re-emphasizes the need to look at this declining Oakdale enrollment and this increase at Meadowlark and see if we can balance that. If we found that all of the families that could attend Oakdale that had been attending Meadowlark, we would see their numbers change to 293. And so that creates a little bit better balance between Meadowlark and Oakdale, and then also a better balance across all of our buildings. And so you can see there again, that difference between largest and smallest schools. Without the boundary change, we're looking at 146 between the smallest and the largest, but with the boundary change, we see that we go to 58. So that gives us much more balance across our schools and allows us to think about the resources that we're providing and make those adjustments as we have some balance there. Now, as you see that the data source for this talks about monthly enrollment reported on February 13th, and that's with the ALC, the Adaptive Learning Center, and the Meadowlark Oakdale boundary adjustments. So we've looked kind of behind the scenes of what we project for 2020, 2021. And so when we think about this projection and this transition plan, the established students and siblings living in the reassigned area will be allowed to continue at Meadowlark for the duration of their elementary enrollment if their parents and guardians desire. If the parents and guardians elect to have their children finish elementary school at Meadowlark, the family will be responsible for transportation. Busing to Meadowlark will no longer be provided for students residing within the newly defined Oakdale attendance area beginning in 2020-2021. So we are allowing the family to make choice. And with that choice, they'll look at the full picture of that family dynamic, and they may continue to attend Meadowlark, or they may go ahead and go into the newly defined boundary area, where they live, and attend Oakdale. And so students from families who are new to Salina Public Schools will attend the school as defined by our 2020-2021 boundary lines. So when we make that statement, this is for families that are new, that don't have any other siblings in our schools already currently. So be thinking about like new kindergartners coming in that don't have any older siblings in schools, and think about families that move into our Salina area. The timeline for the boundary change is that on March 10th, you already actually were introduced to much of this information at a BOE work session, and Mrs. Xline, Superintendent, went through the majority of this information to get the board informed through a work session format. And then today we have the discussion agenda. And so I went through the information that was provided in the board packet. On April 15th, there will be a media release regarding the proposed boundary changes. So this way we can let our public know that this boundary change is going to be brought back to the 28th meeting. At the April 28th meeting, that will be an action agenda item, and there will be including an opportunity for the public to address the board, and that will come through some guidelines that are provided. And so in that media release, all of that information will be provided to our public. Then on April 29th, letters will be mailed to the impacted families. On May 15th, family preference deadline. So the families will have approximately 2 weeks to think through that, to weigh the pros and cons, what's best for their family as they think about the next school year. And so they will let the school district know, and we'll have all of that guidance in the letter for them to do that. And then on May 30th, the school assignments will be finalized. And that May 30th, the finalization of that school assignments allows us then to project out and think about staffing, think about school needs, and the resources that are needed as we think through how those populations will shift between those two buildings. Now, the other thing that was included in the packet was the boundary map. And so let me go ahead and kind of just briefly talk about that. And so as you look kind of to the right of your screen, you're going to see that beige color there that's right next to the purple. That is the current Meadowlark boundary area. And so you'll see that boundary extends down, and I don't know if you can see my mouse, but basically you kind of follow that and extends down to Magnolia Road. When we look at the proposed changes, no other boundary lines are going to be changed except for the purple and the beige. So Oakdale is purple and the beige is Meadowlark. And so let's look down at the new map. And as we look at the new map, and these will be available online for our public to look at, you'll see that the purple has expanded. So that's showing how Oakdale we've changed that boundary line between those two schools. And you'll see that the beige of Meadowlark has reduced. Now, when you look at that, you think, okay, we look at that large purple area. Why did it only affect the numbers as they've been projected? The reason for that is because when you look at that purple area, that really has a low density in some of that area of students in that space. Some of it's farmland, things like that. So that's why that space is so large, because the population density is quite low in some of those areas. But then you'll see that we have the extension down of Meadowlark in the same manner, and you'll see that there's a little bit of purple that kind of comes into that Meadowlark area. So there's just kind of a change of that boundary line, and that allows Oakdale to expand its boundary area. That will allow us to have a higher number of population at Oakdale, and that decreases the boundary area for Meadowlark. therefore reducing its population over time, and that will create a better balance between Oakdale and Meadowlark. And that is the reason why we're bringing this boundary change to you. The reason that we focused on these two schools is to affect the least amount of students, to use a natural mechanism such as two schools that share a boundary line to try to adjust and create a better balance between our elementary buildings. So I will entertain questions at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Rector. Does anyone have any questions for her?
No questions for me. This is Mark Vandre. The proposal makes sense. I appreciate the opportunity that impacted families have the opportunity to stay at their current school if they so choose, but the opportunity to balance the barriers makes sense.
Yes, thank you. So at the next meeting, we will be voting on this. And so between now and then, we want to make sure the public knows that they have an opportunity to comment. And if you want to make a public comment, we ask that you contact Deborah Howard, the board clerk, so that you can put your information in and give her your comments. Her contact information is located on the website, usd305.com, under the superintendent's page. So please send your comments to her, and we will figure out how to deal with them by the next meeting. And then we will vote on the change at that meeting. And what's the date of that meeting again?
It was April 28th.
Oh, okay, April 28th meeting. Thank you. I believe that's all on the discussion agenda. So we will, yes, thank you. We'll go on to the school board reports and upcoming dates of importance. I think I'll just like go backwards alphabetically. So that means that Dana's gonna start.
I have just been working with the Salina Education Foundation in some Zoom meetings, and that's the only place I've been, is in front of my computer.
Thank you. And Gabe?
Nothing to report. There was no Central Kansas Cooperative Education Board of Control meeting for March, and the Parks and Rec Advisory Board was canceled for March. It has also been canceled for April, but we are having a Board of Control meeting tomorrow.
Thank you. Scott?
Like Dana, meeting online, not a whole lot to talk about. Actually, pretty quick meeting. So that's with the Education Service Center, the Adult Education Center.
Okay, Salina Adult Education Center?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Scott, not Scott, Jim.
Gotcha. So I had a Heartland meeting that was done by Zoom. It was interesting to hear how they're adapting as well to the changes, you know, now that we're in the COVID-19 world, I guess we would say. One thing that, you know, I made a comment there, and I'll make the comment here. I'm very proud of our district staff, our district administration, our students, and the parents for adapting and coming through this change. It's been very impressive to watch and see how everyone's working together to get that through. I also attended last week the regional roundtable for KASB, and listening to some other board members from around the state, it just emphasized that comment that I just made. We are progressing, we are transitioning, we're doing a lot of things that a lot of other districts are still trying to maneuver through. To be able to talk about some of the things that we've been able to do for our staff, for our students, for our families, and not all the districts have the ability to pull that together and make it happen right now. They have goals of getting that done, but we are well down that route at this point. So kudos.
Thank you, Jim. Emma, do you have a report?
Yes, I attended an executive meeting with the Smoke Hill Education Service Center on April 6th, and then another meeting on April 9th. And Donna Smith will be teaching dyslexia training to teachers to help them with their students. And then they've accessed a registration access so that teachers and principals and superintendents can access registration to their workshops at a faster rate. They'll be installing that. And then Tim Lowry did storytelling, but because of the virus, unable to do that this year. But anyway, some of their employees are working from home, a few in the office, and Chris Modelmog is there, and so is Diane. But the others are working from home, but they are staying very, very busy. So anyway, they have a golf tournament coming up June 1, but that's to be determined. So we'll see what happens with the virus and those type of things. So thank you. And I too attended that the state meeting from Topeka. And I agree with Jim. We are ahead of the game, and we can be very proud of our leadership team, our superintendent, Lynn, and all the wonderful things that we've accomplished and done. It's been wonderful. Thank you all.
Thank you, Emma. Mark?
So as Gabe mentioned, we were scheduled to have a Parks and Rec Advisory Board meeting, but that was canceled due to COVID. We have no word about future meetings for that particular board. We'll see what happens. As Dana mentioned, we've been involved with Salina Education Foundation. There's been a number of meetings of the executive committee virtually as we try to replace Ms. McIntyre, who retires at the end of this fiscal year. So expect further word there fairly soon, I think. The only other item I might note, again, a praise to our district. I fielded a call the other day from the superintendent of the Anderson County School District. Some of you are aware my father-in-law has been on the school board there for 32 years. He referred the superintendent to me, who I referred on to Mrs. Peters and Mr. Upson with some questions about the insurance plan. So the fact that other districts are reaching out to us about things we've already decided was a big kudo to the whole team, I think. So I just thank the whole organization for all the great work they're doing.
Great. Thank you, Mark. My reports include, well, I think we all attended the special board meeting on the 2nd to hire Dr. Charles Kipp as South High's new principal. I attended a webinar, a Head Start webinar on the 6th of April, which discussed a lot of money that is being received by Head Start organizations through the Federal CARES Act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, to allow Head Start organizations to add special summer programs for the students that are about to go into kindergarten and those with IEPs to try to get them caught up to where they would have been but for the pandemic. These dollars come with a lot of flexibility and not many strings. And I know that Lisa Larson is, she also attended and is getting a plan ready in case we are able to have Head Start during the summer, which of course is not at all certain. But those are new dollars that are for that purpose in the big CARES Act. I had also attended the KASB Regional Roundtable by Zoom, and it was my first experience working to use the breakout meetings in Zoom. And so we had about 60 or 70 people in this meeting, but they broke us all into small groups of about 6 or 8. And we had small group discussions, which worked out really well. It's really hard to talk when you have hard to have discussion when you have a large number of people in a Zoom meeting. But when they used the breakout sessions, we could really talk. What I learned in my small group was that just like us, the larger districts, well, especially Manhattan is the one that was in my district, we were all competing for hotspots to try and get them for our kids that didn't have internet. And we're all waiting longer than we expected to wait to get those. I think we may have received ours before they got theirs. But anyway, it was it was an interesting meeting. I think that's my report. So next on the agenda is the superintendent's report. Ms. Xline?
Thank you, Madam President. Well, to follow up on hotspots, we did receive the hotspots and we did distribution yesterday. It was a mighty cold day to be doing distribution, but we got it done. And I sent an email out to faculty and staff and had so many volunteers to help with that I couldn't even use everyone. And so I think that's just another testament to how supportive our staff is for what we need to do for students. But we did distribute those, about a little over 350. We have buildings following up with families that weren't able to come pick up their hotspots yesterday. And we're working through some data issues. We have a limit per day on those for data and trying to figure out how much is enough for the kinds of things we're asking students to do educationally. And so we've gotten some feedback from our families today and have made some adjustments, and we'll continue to do so. And so I'm just pleased that we have those in our families' hands and that we've created a situation where there's access. Now it's just figuring out how much data is needed to do what it is that we want them to do. You may have heard that I was on the radio several times again, have another radio spot tomorrow morning that I don't know that anyone knows about. That is on Friendly Fire and will be at 8:08 tomorrow morning. And then Thursday afternoon again on KSKG at 10 after 5. And we'll see about KINA. My guess is that I'll have a chance to be on KINA again this weekend.
So is Ms. Xline, is Friendly Fire is on KSAL AM 1150. Is it also on
Correct.
the KSAL FM station? Do you know?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But I do know 1150 and I know 8:08 tomorrow morning. So
Thank you. We'll count on that.
We did submit our continuous learning plan to the Kansas State Department of Education, and the Kansas State Board of Education actually acted on those today. And so ours has been through that approval process. And so we've been given the nod on our plan. So that's good news. Thank you for your support on that at the last meeting. We had that in front of you at the last meeting. And then the last thing that I want to update you on is our building principals have been, they've gotten to the point where they could have some conversations about what do we do about graduation, because they were really concerned about that very special day that students work toward their entire K-12 career. And how do we do that given the social distancing guidelines, given the limits to group size gatherings, given the stay-at-home provisions right now? What do we do? And so we have landed on two different celebrations. The first celebration will be on the originally scheduled graduation day, and that will be on 99 KG. Shane McClintock from 99 KG was willing to do a radio graduation ceremony. And so something a little bit different, that Central Highs will be at 2:00 p.m. on the radio, and South Highs will be at 5:00 p.m. That will be an opportunity to recognize our graduates over the airwaves. It will be an opportunity for the graduation speakers to speak to the students. One of the things about graduation is that it really is a new beginning. It's the end of one piece of life, but it's a new beginning and a new start on a new piece of life. And so having that opportunity for the graduation speaker and the different student speakers and the building principal to address the class as they're embarking on new will happen on the May 17th date. Then in addition, we really wanted a chance, we talked about it at length, we really wanted a chance for students to be able to walk across the stage. We wanted that more formal cap and gown celebration. And what we knew is that we could have scheduled that, during the summer at some point, but we were concerned that if we would schedule that and then have to change again, that wasn't good. So what we decided on is that when we when we had the restrictions on large group gatherings have changed, then at that point, we will schedule a ceremony and we will have a chance for, we'll hire a photographer. We'll have a chance for the students to walk across the stage. We'll do a processional and a recessional so that families can get pictures of that. We're hoping to do that at a time when families could actually be there. And, all that's contingent on the way this COVID-19 progresses and how those gathering restrictions move over time. But what we're going to do is give our families 4 to 6 weeks notice, ask for an RSVP so we know who is participating so that we can make that special for the students. So a combination graduation there, but I feel good that we have something in place and that we have a way to honor the students and all their efforts and work, and a way for our families to perhaps be a part of that and to enjoy that too. Sometimes as a mom or a dad or a grandparent or a friend of the family, that's just such an important time for us too as adults. And so that's what we have in place right now.
Thank you. I talked to a parent of a senior yesterday, and he had not heard about this. So the word is still getting out. Okay, thank you, Ms. Xline. The next thing on the agenda that needs to be done is an executive session for personnel. We need a motion to go into executive session for some number of minutes. Ms. Wright, are you there with that information?
I am here. I believe if Superintendent Xline agrees, we need 15 minutes.
So I think, Madam President, that we really need to do 20 then, so that we can all be back in this session at the time that we're supposed to be back. We'll do the 15-minute discussion, but if we would do the executive session for 20 so that we have time to get logged back on here, that would help.
Okay, so if what do you call that? My clock says that it's, well, probably by the time we make this motion, it'll be 5:53. So 20 minutes from then is about 12 minutes after 6, I believe. Is that right, Ms. Howard?
Yes, that would be correct. So about 5:53 is when you're going in?
I would say so. I haven't had a motion, but that's what my guess is. So do I hear a motion on the executive session?
Madam President, this is Jim Fletcher. Would you be opposed to me using solid numbers like 5:55?
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be all right. Yes, that's fine.
Very good. Madam President, this is Jim Fletcher. I move that the Board of Education go into executive session. I lost my motion.
We'll give you a minute.
At 5:55 for 20 minutes for the purpose of discussing personnel matters of non-elected personnel and their contractual obligations. Because if this matter were discussed in open session, it might invade the privacy of those discussed, and that the Board of Education reconvene into open session at 6:15 p.m. via live stream.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that?
Emma Doherty, second.
Thank you, Emma. It's been moved and seconded that we go into executive session at 5:55 and come back out at 6:15. This was for personnel and all the other verbiage that Jim just gave us. Let's vote. Mark?
Mark Bandre, aye.
Emma?
Emma Doherty, aye.
Jim?
Jim Fletcher, aye.
Scott?
Doug Gardner, aye.
Gabe?
Gabe Grant, aye.
Dana?
Dana Costo, aye.
And Ann Zimmerman, aye. Motion carried 7-0. We still have 1 minute before we go in, but I guess we all have to leave this meeting, correct? And then we go into a different meeting. So we'll see you soon. I think all 7 of us are back, so I will declare us.
Ann,
Oh, yes.
President.
Oh,
we
we're
need to
not
wait
time
Yeah,
yet.
we have to wait until the actual time in case
Right.
we stepped away.
Right.
It's a little odd when we're on like this.
Madam President, it is 6:15.
Thank you. This is Ann Zimmerman, and we are back in open session, and no action is needed to follow that executive session. So now I can accept a motion to adjourn.
Madam President, I
Yes.
propose that we adjourn this USD 305 Zoom meeting. Thank you all.
Do I hear a second?
Madam President, Scott Gardner, second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor? Well, no. Mark? Your
Mark
vote?
Bandre, aye.
Emma?
Emma Doherty, aye.
Jim?
Jim Fletcher, aye.
Scott Gardner, aye.
Gabe?
Gabe Grant, aye.
Dana?
Dana Costo, aye.
And Ann Zimmerman, aye. Motion is carried and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all